The Georgetown University campus buzzed with anticipation on a crisp afternoon in April 2025. The main auditorium was packed for a headline event, a dialogue on new leadership in global politics, a live debate between students and world influencers. Kash Patel, in his late 30s and already a familiar face in American politics, double-checked his tie and ran through his notes one last time. Unlike most of the students, Kash wasn't here to learn. He was here to stake his claim as the new conservative voice in a changing America. "This is my chance," he whispered to a colleague backstage, "to show them I'm more than just another political insider." But Kash had no idea who his real challenger would be. Sitting in a private room across the campus, ready to join the event via live stream, was Denzel Washington, legendary actor, activist, and one of America's most respected moral voices. Denzel had accepted the invitation to speak on youth leadership, intrigued by the prospect of debating someone like Kash Patel. The moderator, Dr. Sarah Chen, opened the event with gravitas. "Today, we're honored to host Kash Patel, a Georgetown alumnus and rising figure in national politics. And joining us virtually, Mr. Denzel Washington, actor, humanitarian, and advocate for social change. Our topic, young leadership and global responsibility." Dr. Chen turned to Kash Patel first. "Kash, would you like to begin with your thoughts on youth leadership?" Kash stood with practiced confidence. "Thank you, Professor Chen. I believe it's the responsibility of young leaders, especially in America, to challenge the status quo left behind by previous generations. Too often we see so-called change makers who are just new faces for old problems. It's time to demand real results, not just noise." The crowd felt the subtle sting of his words. On the big screen, Denzel watched, a patient but calculating smile appearing on his face. Dr. Chen invited Denzel to respond. Denzel leaned in, his presence filling the screen even from a distance. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. It's always interesting to hear about leadership from those who've benefited most from the system," Denzel began. "Kash is right. Young leaders should question the status quo. But the real test is, are we challenging the system to truly improve people's lives? Or just to make headlines and score points?" Kash's jaw tightened, but he kept his smile. "With all due respect, Mr. Washington, it's easy to talk about change from the comfort of Hollywood or the nonprofit world. Try fixing the real problems: corruption, bureaucracy, when you're in the trenches." Denzel didn't blink. He reached for a folder beside him, his voice calm but commanding. "Let's talk about real change, Kash. You're fond of numbers, so here are a few. When I started my activism in LA, youth incarceration rates in the city were at 42%. Today, through education and opportunity programs, it's down to 19%. That's a 55% reduction in less than a decade." The auditorium grew quiet, sensing the debate was about to get much more intense. Denzel leafed through another page of his folder, voice steady but forceful. "Let's add a few more facts. When I began my community work, the literacy rate in South Central LA was only 35%. Now it's 67%. Access to clean water in the neglected neighborhoods, up from 42% to 78%. Average household income rose by nearly 40% through mentorship and opportunity programs. These aren't just numbers, their lives changed. This is what it means to create real impact from the ground up, despite years of broken systems." Denzel paused, letting the statistics settle over the auditorium. His gaze fixed on Kash Patel. "Kash, with all due respect, besides being born into influence and moving within political circles, what measurable results can you point to? What have you accomplished that's made a difference for any outside your immediate sphere?" The room grew tense. Kash's confidence visibly wavered for the first time, his composure slipping. "Well, I'm working hard. I've dedicated myself to public service, and I'm still learning." "Learning is good," Denzel cut in, his tone kind but unyielding. "But you just criticized a whole generation for being all talk and no action. What actions have you taken, Kash, that give you the right to judge others?" Kash tried to regroup. "I'm preparing for a bigger role, a real career in politics. That takes groundwork." "Preparation is essential," Denzel agreed, nodding. "But I suggest you do more groundwork before passing judgment on leaders who've already delivered results for their communities. The humiliation was palpable, but Denzel wasn't finished. In fact, he continued, voice deepening, if we're going to talk about questioning the system, maybe we should get specific. Cash's face tensed, a flicker of anxiety in his eyes. Denzel opened a manila envelope, his demeanor growing serious. You see, Cash, when you call out empty noise, you should make sure your own record is clear. Recently, information came to my attention. Public information, but relevant nonetheless. Cash shifted in his seat. Beads of sweat dotted his brow. My team, just like anyone concerned with accountability, has reviewed some of your activities here at Georgetown. For example, your attempts to forge political connections at parties where illegal substances were consumed. Substances purchased, as I understand, with a family member's credit card. A gasp rippled through the audience. Cash turned pale. Mr. Washington, I don't know what you're referring to. Don't you? Denzel replied, his voice low and firm. That's interesting, because there are photographs, Cash. Photos of you at a party on March 23rd using substances and openly discussing how to leverage your last name for political gain. But that's just the beginning. Cash's legs shook as he tried to steady himself, but the tension in the hall was suffocating. The real concern, Denzel pressed on, are the audio recordings. Recordings where you share your genuine thoughts about minority communities. Language so ugly I wouldn't repeat it in this academic setting, but it reveals the real character behind the public persona. Cash's panic was visible. This can't be real. Would you like me to play a sample? Denzel offered calmly. Let your peers judge for themselves. Cash shook his head, fear overtaking him. These are baseless. Denzel's tone didn't change. I have the documentation, and I'm prepared to share it if you continue to deny. Denzel lifted another document from the stack, his voice steady, each word landing like a hammer. For example, here's a transcript from March 15th. You said, and I quote, "These people think they're smart, but deep down they're all primitive. My father was right about them." A wave of shock hit the audience. Students glanced at each other, expressions frozen in disbelief. Denzel continued, flipping the page. And here's an audio from April 2nd. In it, you're heard saying you'll use your family's name to land a State Department position, so you wouldn't have to compete with, and I quote, "these losers who actually worked for it." Cash, now desperate, interrupted. "That's not my voice. You can't prove that." Denzel's eyes narrowed, a cold, almost sad smile on his face. "Actually, voice analysis confirms it's you, Cash. Would you like to hear the most revealing one?" He leaned forward, as if speaking directly to Cash's soul. "There's a recording from March 18th, where you talk about cleansing American politics of all the minorities who don't understand how the world really works." Cash was visibly sweating, his hands shaking. "Would you care to explain these statements to your fellow students?" Denzel's tone was almost fatherly now, disappointment rather than anger. Cash stammered, I can't. This is a setup." "A setup?" Denzel echoed. "These recordings came from your own friends, people who were so disturbed by what they heard that they brought them to the authorities. Someone very close to you was the one who broke the silence." Cash's eyes darted desperately around the auditorium, searching for a way out. "Who?" he whispered. Denzel's expression softened, but his eyes remained steely. "You'll find out soon, Cash." He picked up his phone and tapped a few times, then looked up. "Since you're questioning the authenticity, maybe we should let everyone hear a small sample. If these aren't your words, you shouldn't mind, right?" "No," Cash blurted out, leaping from his chair. "You can't do that." "Why not?" Denzel asked, calm and unwavering. "If you never said it, what's there to fear?" Without another word, the auditorium's speakers came alive with the unmistakable sound of Cash's voice. "They're all the same. They think they can compete, but they know they're inferior. My dad always said all they do is complain and beg for handouts." Gasps and cries of disbelief swept through the hall. Some students stood up, faces pale with horror. "Turn it off!" Cash shouted, rushing at the sound equipment. Dr. Chen quickly stopped the playback, tension heavy in the air. "Cash, you need to calm down," she pleaded. "This is illegal." Kash yelled, wild with panic. You can't use secret recordings. Denzel remained serene, even as Kash melted down on stage. These recordings were legally obtained by agencies concerned with security and integrity. It's all lies, Kash screamed, staggering across the stage, his composure in ruins. Kash, Denzel pressed, if they're lies, why are you so upset? Kash froze, the truth slipping out before he could stop himself. Because this will destroy everything. The confession echoed like a gunshot. Ah, Denzel said softly, so you confirm they're real. Realizing his slip, Kash's panic deepened. No, that's not what Denzel cut him off, gently but firmly. Maybe it's time to stop lying, Kash. Time to start taking responsibility for your words and actions. As Kash looked around, he saw only faces filled with shock, disgust, and disappointment. A crushing silence filled the auditorium. Kash Patel, desperate, his voice trembling, pleaded, "You don't understand. I'm Kash Patel. You can't treat me like this." That was the last straw. Even those who'd once respected him now recoiled, their faces a mix of contempt and disappointment. Kash began pacing the stage, unraveling before everyone's eyes, while Denzel Washington watched calmly from the screen, a pillar of composure in the storm. "You don't understand," Kash shouted to the crowd. "I have powerful friends. This will come back on you. You'll pay for this." Dr. Chen stepped in gently. "Kash, please, you need to calm down." "I won't calm down," he yelled, then nearly letting slip another slur before catching himself, proving without a doubt what the recordings had already shown. Denzel decided it was time for the final truth. "Kash, there's one last thing I want to share with everyone here." "No, enough," Kash protested, but Denzel pressed on. "The person who brought these recordings forward was someone you trusted deeply, a close friend, and they left a message explaining their decision." Denzel looked directly into the camera, his voice unwavering. This friend said, and I quote, "Kash Patel represents everything wrong with unchecked privilege in American politics. He uses connections for opportunities he doesn't deserve, expresses dangerous views, and plans to push a hateful agenda. The country deserves to know the truth before it's too late." Kash stood frozen, the betrayal sinking in. "Who?" he whispered, voice hollow. Denzel answered calmly, "You'll find out soon enough. But know this, there's more evidence than what's been shown today." Suddenly, Kash began to laugh, a harsh, broken sound teetering on hysteria. "You think you've destroyed me? You have no idea what my allies can do." Denzel's voice remained composed. "Your allies can't change the truth, Kash. No one is above facts and evidence." "Yes, we are," Kash screamed. "People like me, we always get away with it." The outburst was more damning than any recording. Denzel only raised an eyebrow. "So you admit your family has a history of evading responsibility?" Realizing his mistake, Kash's laughter grew wilder. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he shouted, pointing accusingly at Denzel's image. That's when security finally intervened, moving calmly but decisively toward the stage. "Mr. Patel, you need to come with us," said Georgetown's head of security. "Don't touch me," Kash shouted, backing away, his mask of confidence completely gone. "You don't know who I am." The security guard replied softly, "We know exactly who you are, and right now you need help." Dr. Chen had already called emergency medical services, recognizing Kash's breakdown. From the screen, Denzel addressed the room one last time with dignity and care. "Professor Chen, I think it's best to end the session here. Mr. Patel needs privacy and medical care to confront the consequences of his own actions." "I agree," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Thank you all," Denzel concluded. "May this be a lesson for everyone about integrity, accountability, and the dangers of unchecked privilege." As paramedics arrived at the auditorium, Kash Patel's collapse continued, his voice hoarse and desperate. "This isn't over. My friends will destroy all of you." A paramedic approached gently. "Mr. Patel, let's help you calm down." "I don't need help," Kash barked, but the shock and confusion in his eyes told another story. In the seats, students whispered nervously, some already recording the chaotic scene on their phones. Kash Patel's reputation and any hope of a future political career was unraveling in real time. "You don't understand," Kash kept shouting, as he was escorted out, his words echoing with delusion. "I'm the future. I deserve to be in charge." That last outburst struck the crowd deeply. The real horror, they realized, wasn't just the racism or the scandal. It was Cash's absolute belief that he was born to rule. Outside, as Cash was placed into an ambulance for psychological assessment, the students stood in small groups, stunned. "Dude," one muttered to another, "I always thought he was a jerk, but this was scary." "Imagine if he ever got real power," the other replied. Within the hour, videos of Cash's meltdown flooded every major social media platform. His name became the #1 global trending topic, with millions watching clips of the exposure and breakdown unfold. News headlines blared. Breaking: Kash Patel's public collapse after Denzel Washington unveils racist recordings. Full video in comments. Georgetown student removed by paramedics after debate disaster. University launches investigation. Meanwhile, in a quiet office, Cash's former mentors and allies scrambled to contain the damage. In a mansion far away, Cash's most powerful political backers received the dreaded call. "Sir, we have a situation with Cash," an aide said quietly. "How bad?" asked a senior advisor. "Very bad. There are videos. There are racist recordings. He had a breakdown on live stream and had to be hospitalized." There was a long, heavy silence on the line. "Is there any way to spin this?" came the uncertain reply. "Honestly, sir, he confessed to everything on camera. He even claimed our circle can always escape the consequences." A sharp curse followed. "He just torpedoed everything." Back at the hospital, Cash was being sedated after lashing out at the doctors and nurses. "You don't know who you're messing with," he murmured over and over. "My people will sue you all." A psychiatrist made a careful note. Patient displays severe pathological narcissism, extreme entitlement, and a possible disconnect from reality. At Georgetown, the university's leadership called an emergency meeting. "We have a student who made hate speech, collapsed publicly, and threatened others. Is this a violation of our code of conduct?" "It's a violation of several policies," another official replied. "Hate speech, misconduct, and threatening behavior." The university prepared a public statement, and Kash Patel's name would be synonymous with disgrace. "How did this happen?" demanded one of Kash Patel's most powerful mentors, his voice simmering with fury as he paced his office. "How did Denzel Washington get those recordings?" Jason Miller, Cash's longtime advisor, answered quietly, "Sir, it wasn't Denzel. Someone close to Cash turned over the evidence. His own friends at Georgetown were disturbed by what they heard." "Who betrayed him?" "We're still investigating. All we know is it was someone he trusted completely." The mentors seethed as the media storm swelled. "Sir, every major outlet, CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News, is running with this story," Miller reported. "And what are they saying?" Miller hesitated, then replied, "They're focusing on the public breakdown, the racist recordings, and the impact on your entire movement. Cash has become part of your brand. He's not just a staffer anymore. He was talking about running for office. The media won't treat him as a kid." Across the world, Denzel Washington appeared in a follow-up BBC interview. A journalist pressed, "Some say you were too hard on Kash Patel, who is barely out of college." Denzel answered without hesitation, "With all due respect, age is no excuse for words and actions that endanger the moral fabric of society. If Kash Patel aspires to political leadership, he must be accountable for what he says and believes." And the racist recordings? Denzel's expression was grave. "These views aren't just immature, they're a threat to democracy and social stability. When privilege turns to prejudice, we must all speak out, no matter who is involved or how young they are." Back at Georgetown, the fallout continued. Kash Patel was placed on indefinite medical leave, receiving psychological treatment in a private clinic. A university investigation confirmed he had violated multiple codes of conduct: hate speech, misconduct, and threatening behavior. The official announcement was swift. Kash Patel is suspended indefinitely. Georgetown will not tolerate hate speech or threatening conduct, regardless of background or family name. The identity of the friend who exposed Kash was finally revealed: Eric Davidson, his own roommate and longtime confidant. In an exclusive interview, Eric explained, Cash's opinions grew darker and more extreme. He wasn't just talking, he truly believed it, and he planned to use power to impose those beliefs. I couldn't let that happen. As news spread, polling showed a sharp drop in support for the political network that had championed Cash. Public concern over family values and character dominated talk shows and editorial columns. A CNN analyst remarked, "It's not just about Kash Patel's private thoughts. He exposed the underlying attitudes of those around him. This is a wake-up call for everyone in public life." Denzel, once criticized for being too harsh, was vindicated as more details emerged. Editorials praised his courage for standing up to privilege and exposing dangerous ideologies before they could take root in power. In the end, the story's true legacy was clear. Privilege cannot shield anyone from consequences, not when the evidence is overwhelming and the public demands integrity. Leaders, no matter how young or connected, must be held accountable for their beliefs and their actions. For Kash Patel, his political future was over before it began, destroyed not by enemies, but by his own words, his own arrogance, and the bravery of a friend who chose truth over loyalty.